Howdy folks, Shell Presto here. I'm doing a bit of a late night recording so that I can do a 3 marker challenge. So I've been gearing up to do a 3 marker challenge. This was actually a test one just to see how I do. I had picked these 3 colors the other day, like a magenta, a light lavender, and a sort of dark peach corally color. And this is what I came up with, but this is just a practice. And I want to do a real one now. So for choosing the markers, I will be picking from my big load o Copics here. I'll have to zoom out here a minute just so you can see them. Now, for the sake of this video challenge, I'm not going to include the grays because I want 3 colors. The whole point of it is to see how you can blend colors, so that's what I intend to do. I'm going to put this back on here. Okay. And since I do not have a bag with a small hole in it that I can shove all the markers into, I'm going to be using this brand new unwashed suit of my son's. So, and if the reason that I'm doing the picking of the markers in advance is because I have to do my live recordings when my son is asleep. So, alright, let's get these suckers in here. I've got all my reds going in. Alright, taking this, shaking it up. Alright, now let's pick these 3 markers. So, got YG95, Pale Olive. G19, Bright Parrot Green. And V17 Amethyst. So, this is what we've got. Okay, on to the artwork. Now, I ain't gonna lie, I was really disappointed in these color choices. I actually went into this picking ceremony hoping I'd get something so I could draw a chick and flowers, or a chick and something elemental like fire. Just because a lot of the YouTube artists I enjoy watching often draw women with flowers, and I never do. But I did not get a single color that would remotely pass for a skin tone. Heck, the colors were so dark, I don't think they'd pass for most fairies or alien skins. I could have drawn just a flower, but that felt like a cop-out because, well, flowers can be virtually any color. None of my characters that I've already designed have a green and purple costume, so that left me to brainstorm what the heck would look good with this color scheme. And it was pretty much Spider-Man villains. Yes, I read too many comic books, and yes, I'm proud of that. So the ones that immediately came to mind were Green Goblin, Beetle, Mysterio, and, well, Mesmero is an X-Men villain, but he's all green and purple with no skin tones too. Hardly anyone knows who Beetle is, and even fewer people know who Mesmero is, so they were out. I adore Mysterio, but his fishbowl head is too easy to draw, so I imagined you fine folks would be a little bored with that. And so that left Green Goblin. And yes, I know I could have drawn Joker, but sometimes I feel I'm the only person in the world who hates Joker. Sorry, Mark Hamill, nothing personal. If you don't like him too, please let me know in the comments so I know that you exist and I am not alone. Now, if you're wondering how I came up with this wonderfully dynamic pose, it was a mishmash. I had some great Senshi stock photos of one of their models doing some almost feral-looking poses while pretending to control water. And then, because if you're going to draw Green Goblin, you've got to draw that glider, I tried to think of activities where people would make a similar pose. Obviously, free-flying hoverboards aren't a thing yet, but skateboarders get a lot of air on the half-pipe, so I looked up skateboarding competitions and got some ideas of how I could make that water-bending pose work in midair on a glider. So Stan Lee died during the days that I was working on this piece, which was pretty surreal. Steve Ditko died this year, too. Those are the creators of Spider-Man, if you're not in the know. Drawing Green Goblin is not the tribute to those men that I would make, but fate and timing has apparently decided that's what's meant to be. Superheroes have been a huge part of my life. I literally can't remember the first time I watched the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon and the 81 Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I was just too young. Younger folks may know Stan Lee from his cameos in Marvel movies, but any Spidey-loving kid could pick his voice out clear as day well before we knew what he looked like. He did the intro on the Spider-Man cartoons. I went a little heavy-handed on the black shadows, which I didn't want to do because it's a marker challenge, but I didn't want to render all the folds in Green Goblin shorts. So with those shadows being so dark, that black should have carried up into his chest, but I wanted to emphasize the color from the markers, so I left his chest mostly white during inking anyway. Anyway, I was a pretty introverted kid. I did hang out with other kids, but I also got made fun of or beat up a lot, often by those same kids that were my friends. So I often mentally distanced myself from people. Stan Lee was the guy who brought the down-on-his-luck superhero into vogue. I was a girl in grade school in a small town instead of a teenage guy in New York City, but I really connected with loser Peter Parker's uphill battle to make friends in college, and found the sharp contrast to his hidden, web-slinging, sharp-witted spider persona fascinating. I was allowed to rent, was it 2 or 3? Anyway, 2 or 3 videos on Friday when I was a kid, because you could keep them till Monday over the weekend, and I must have rented Spider-Man vs. the Vulture dozens of times. Strangely though, I didn't know that comic books existed until 1993, when my brother bought me 2 Avengers comics on a car ride. And it wasn't until the X-Men cartoon came out later that year that I began seeking comics out. That really changed my life, though. The X-Men became my creative outlet that let me survive grade school and high school. Drawing just sort of became what I did after that, and what I wanted to do. And I wanted to tell fantastic, otherworldly stories. And now I do, with my husband. Heck, in addition to bringing over homemade meals for Mike back when he was a bachelor, the way to a man's heart can at least partially be through his stomach, ladies. I also won him over with a drawing of Firestar from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Not to mention that we bonded over an online forum board superhero RPG. So, yeah, I can honestly say my life wouldn't have turned out the same way if Stan Lee and Steve Ditko hadn't existed. which is a bizarre thought. You'll notice that I start by putting the dark shadows in the skin area first with the purple. Not a lot of artists would do this. Most go light to dark. Now, I wouldn't normally go in with a color this dark, but I do like to lay in a mid-tone for the shadows sometimes before I go in with my lightest colors. Because the more you go over the darker colors with your lighter colors, the more they blend out and become soft gradients. I especially knew this purple was darker than I wanted, so I laid it in early hoping the lighter green would bring it up to the shade that I wanted, and it did, which was pretty lucky. Stan Lee lived to a ripe old age, so sad isn't the right word for his passing. But an age, an era of comic books ended with his passing. He wrote comics in a way. He didn't write them for kids, but he also didn't make them overly adult. Literally everyone could enjoy them. There are brilliant modern comics that I enjoy that I wouldn't let my son read until he's an older teen. And there are modern comics I don't enjoy because they are so focused on targeting a specific audience, or getting so caught up in the real world today that they lose their sense of escapism and classic storytelling. But I can pick up an early issue of X-Men, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, or Avengers, and enjoy them as much as the day 11-year-old me read them. They did tackle some tough topics and engaging stories, but I'd have no problem giving them to a kid who was just starting to master reading. And the dialogue wasn't dumbed down at all. I really appreciated that. The X-Men's beast alone was preparation enough for the SAT's verbal portion. There were other comic book writers who had that classic sense to them. Roy Thomas, Chris Claremont, John Byrne. I could probably think of a few others, but this is the top of my head. But the stories I enjoyed were also written during a time when Stan Lee was editor or publisher. But that era is over now. It's a real shame, because I feel like a lot of the blame rests on Alan Moore's shoulders. I loved Watchmen. Watchmen was a fantastic, but also very adult, comic book series that I think every mature comic book fan should read, especially if you want to be a comic book artist. Dave Gibbons is a wonderful artist, but his adherence to the 9-panel comic book page grid in Watchmen is an especially good lesson in how to lay out a story. But Watchmen also brought the idea of the fallen hero into vogue. Stan Lee humanized the superhero and made them relatable, but he also left them heroic. They always found a way to make the right decision. They always remained a role model. Alan Moore made them too human, made them super beings without being superheroes. The popularity of Watchmen paved the way for anti-heroes and moral ambiguity that, while it does occasionally make for good stories, I feel it takes away from what mainstream comics used to be about: escapism and heroism. I still feel that the best comics leave you with a feeling that you can believe in and trust your heroes, that in the end, they will always do right. The Green Goblin, while terrifying, will always be defeated, and Spider-Man will always find a way to stop him, will never be tempted to join him, no matter how many days late Peter Parker is on his rent. Steve Ditko's take on heroism was complex to a degree that I can't explain here, but needless to say, I'll miss his writing and art too. So rest in peace, you pillars of Marvel's Silver Age comics. Rest in peace and know your art remains to change people's lives. The only part of this challenge that really drove me crazy was the eyes. I wanted some shading on the eyes, but these colors were not light enough. I tried the trick where you touch the colorless blender to the tip of a marker to try to get a lighter shade to work with, but it just ended up making a streaky mess. Fortunately, the color is so light that you can hardly tell. Now, I like mixed media paper, I like the feel, and I like how it doesn't lock me into a single choice for mediums. Some people will tell you I should have gone with Bristol board or cardstock paper for a 3-marker challenge, since I knew I'd be using marker. And they might be right. But I also like how much blending I can do on mixed media paper. This paper will hold a lot of ink. But this paper will also absorb a lot of ink. If I had realized I was going to color the entire background green, I may have gone with different paper. This paper was drinking up so much bright Parrot green that it quickly became clear that I would not be getting a flat, even night sky. The marker just couldn't keep up with the paper absorption. So instead, I used the slight streakiness to my advantage and my marker's continued existence, and started coloring in giant circles going outward from the moon. This almost swirling look loaned the piece an additional sense of motion that a flat sky couldn't. And I think it turned out pretty nice in the end. I added some purple in the empty bottom left corner to really give a sense of that gradated moonlight illuminating from, well, the moon. And, well, you folks let me know what you think. Finally, I used Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white to go back in and make white highlights and some touch-ups, and a jelly roll white gel pen to add some stars. If you would like to leave me a tip to put toward getting a refill for my poor bright Parrot green marker, which valiantly held in there for the duration of that night sky, I have a link for my PayPal tip jar in the description. And, of course, buying one of my illustrated novels or short stories off Amazon also contributes to my art supply fund. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it on social media for other people to see. Also, please subscribe so you can see future videos from me. Thanks, and have a nice day. Presto, over and out. My favorite DC Comics hero is the Question, who was created by Steve Ditko. The Question was also the inspiration for Rorschach from Watchmen, by the way. Anyway, while my husband Mike's favorite DC hero is the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan specifically, with Guy Gardner a close second, he's also a big Question fan. Now, originally, the Question was meant to be an objectivist, with objectivism being the philosophy that Steve Ditko lived by. Without getting into a whole discussion on it, let's just say that it's living by that philosophy that makes the Question an interesting character. He has a very strict code of good versus evil and right versus wrong, and scrutinizes the motivations of things that most people take for granted. So, back when Mike was my brand new boyfriend instead of my husband, we were sitting in a booth at a bar, and I dared him to write a Christmas story starring the Question. He laughed and said that would be ridiculous because the Question is an objectivist. He wouldn't even believe in or celebrate Christmas. To which I said, exactly, but I know you could do it. I'll leave a link to the story on my DeviantArt account in the description. We meshed a whole bunch of comic book universes together because that's what we did on our superhero RPG board. So there's references to Harbinger stuff in addition to the Question and a Marvel villain. But I really enjoyed it, and I said I'd make a short comic out of what he wrote. It's not my all-time best art, but it's solid, and I'm proud of it. And it was Mike and my first official collaboration, so, well, that makes me ultra proud of it. So thanks, Steve Ditko, for making one of our favorite superheroes. Hope you all have an awesome day. Presto, over and out.